The live broadcast filled every screen in the penthouse. Governor Rotimi stood at a podium, his face a mask of righteous fury. Microphones bristled before him like a metallic forest. For 10 years, this city has carried a scar, his voice boomed, sharp and clear. A scar called the Unity Riots. We were told it was a tragedy of circumstance. A lie. In the penthouse, the air was thick and still. Chief Kaelo Adebayo stood before the 80-inch television, motionless, a towering figure draped in dark blue agbada. His heavy gold cufflinks were the only points of light in the dim room. Today, I present evidence, the governor continued, holding up a thick manila folder. Proof that the riots were not an accident. They were a tool, a weapon used by 3 men to clear a path for their own greed. On the screen, 3 photographs appeared side by side. A younger Kaelo, a sharp-faced Jide, a fleshy, smiling Femi Balogun. The Aso Rock Trio. Rotimi spat the name like poison. They fanned the flames that destroyed the Omi Allah district. And what stands there today? The foundation of their empire. The Adebayo Pearl Tower. Femi Balogun, slumped in a white leather armchair, made a choked sound. Sweat beaded on his upper lip. He yanked a silk handkerchief from his pocket and dabbed at his face, his hand trembling. "Kaelo, he can't," Femi whispered. "There's no way he can prove that." The chief didn't turn. His eyes were locked on the broadcast, his jaw set like stone. Jide sat at the long glass table, his posture perfect. He wasn't watching the news report. His gaze was fixed on a tablet, his thumb scrolling through frantic streams of red cascading numbers. He rolled a sleek silver pen between his fingers, the movement precise and rhythmic. "Stock value is down 17%, the strategist stated, his voice flat. "Credit lines are freezing. Our partners in Dubai just sent an urgent query." He looked up, his eyes empty of emotion. "The system is hemorrhaging." "Shut up, Jide," Femi snapped, getting to his feet. "This isn't about numbers. Our lives are on that screen." "Our lives are numbers," his partner countered, his voice dangerously quiet. "And right now they are all negative." Kaelo finally moved. He turned from the television, his face a calm, terrifying mask. He walked to the bar, poured a measure of whiskey into a heavy crystal tumbler, and downed it in one smooth motion. "The governor is a dog barking for a contract he lost," the chief said, his voice a low rumble. "He has no real evidence. Just noise." "It's enough clamor to start an avalanche," Jide noted, placing his pen perfectly parallel to his tablet. "Perception is reality, and the current perception is that we are monsters." The penthouse phone began to ring, a shrill, insistent sound that cut through the tension. No one moved to answer it. Then another line began to ring, and a third. "The board," Femi muttered, wiping his brow again. "The investors. My wife." Kaelo silenced him with a single sharp look. He walked to the vast window overlooking the city. Below, the Adebayo Pearl Tower gleamed, a monument of glass and steel piercing the haze. His monument. "We need to change the narrative," the leader said, his back to them. "We need a better story." "A story?" The other man laughed, a high, panicked sound. "What tale beats 100 families losing their homes in a fire?" Jide looked up from his device, a new stillness in his eyes. The silver pen had stopped moving. "I have one," he announced. Both men turned to him. Jide's finger tapped on his screen, pulling up an old, grainy news photo. It showed 3 desperate young men, clothes torn and faces smudged with soot, cowering in a doorway as chaos raged around them. Shielding them from a throne brick was a small, skinny girl, no older than 14, her face fierce and determined. "Do you remember?" the strategist asked. "The child who gave us water. Who pointed us to the alleyway out of the riot?" Femi stared at the photograph. A flicker of something unreadable crossed his face. "The beggar girl. I remember." "The public loves a tale of redemption," Jide explained, his voice gaining its usual cold efficiency. "A story of gratitude. We were saved that day, by an angel of the streets, a child of the very community we are now accused of destroying." Kaelo turned from the window, a slow, predatory smile spreading across his face. He understood instantly. "We find her. We locate her," Jide confirmed. "We shower her with gifts. We create a foundation in her name, the Unity Foundation. We make her a symbol of our deep connection to the people. We don't just deny Rotimi's story. We erase it with a better one. Find her? Femi scoffed. It was 10 years ago. She was a street kid. She could be anywhere. She could be dead. My security team is the best in West Africa, Kaelo said, his voice full of its old authority. Give them the picture. I want her found. I don't care what it takes. He strode over to Jide and looked at the photo. She is no longer a beggar girl. She is our salvation. The hunt began. Jide's tech experts ran facial recognition software on a decade of city surveillance footage. Kaelo's men fanned out across the sprawling metropolis, showing the grainy image in markets, in slums, in bus stations. They burned through money, called in favors, and squeezed informants. For 48 agonizing hours, there was nothing. The news cycle was a hurricane of accusations. The stock price continued to bleed. Femi was a wreck, pacing and drinking. Kaelo was a coiled viper, his patience wearing thin. Only Jide remained calm, processing data, certain of the outcome. Then the call came. A security lead, his voice crackling with static. We have a possible match. Obalenda Bridge, selling bottled water in traffic. Name's Amara. Kaelo's voice was pure steel. Confirm it. 20 minutes later, a new image appeared on Jide's tablet. A live drone feed. A young woman, wiry and thin, weaving through the gridlocked cars. She wore faded jeans and a simple t-shirt. Her movements were quick, efficient. She took money, passed a bottle, and moved on. The drone zoomed in, the picture sharpening. It was her. Older, harder, but unmistakably the same eyes. It's her, Jide said. Femi stared at the screen, his mouth open. My God. A wave of pure relief washed over Kaelo. He felt power return to his limbs. The plan was in motion. Bring her in. No scene. Be discreet. The black, unmarked SUV detached from the flow of traffic, its tinted windows hiding the men inside. It glided silently toward the median where Amara stood, counting a small handful of crumpled Naira notes. She was counting the cars in the northbound lane. 23. A new record for this time of day. The heat rising from the asphalt was dizzying. Her thoughts were on Jabari's medicine. Another 2,000 Naira and she would have enough for the week. A shadow fell over her. She looked up, squinting against the sudden change in light. A gleaming black vehicle had pulled up beside her, its engine a low, expensive hum. Amara took a step back, her hand instinctively tightening on her money. The back door opened. A man in a sharp suit stepped out. He didn't look at her. He looked past her, a silent signal to another man who had appeared behind her. Amara's heart hammered against her ribs. Police. Thugs. She clutched the cash tighter. The first man finally turned his eyes on her. He held up a phone. On its screen was a picture she hadn't seen in a decade. An image of her as a girl, small and fierce, standing in front of 3 terrified men. Amara? The man asked, his voice polite but unyielding. Chief Kaelo Adebayo would like to see you. The SUV's interior was like another world. The roar of Lagos traffic vanished, replaced by a deep, humming silence. The air was cold and smelled faintly of leather and something clean, like antiseptic. Amara sat stiffly, her knuckles white where she gripped the worn strap of her bag. The man in the suit sat opposite her, saying nothing. He hadn't touched her, hadn't forced her. But the car doors had locked with a heavy final thud. She counted the buildings they passed. 47. She tallied the seconds between her own frantic heartbeats. 4, 3, 4. The vehicle descended into a private underground garage, the wheels silent on the polished concrete. The door slid open into a private elevator. The man gestured. She followed. There were no buttons. The elevator simply rose, a smooth, stomach-lurching ascent. The doors opened directly into the penthouse. The sheer scale of the room stole her breath. One entire wall was a sheet of glass, the city sprawling below like a circuit board. Her worn sandals felt rough and loud against the gleaming marble floor. 3 men stood waiting. She recognized them instantly from the news, from the stories everyone was whispering. The Aso Rock Trio. Chief Kaelo Adebayo stepped forward, his smile wide and blinding. He wore a magnificent white agbada embroidered with silver thread. He spread his arms as if to embrace her. The angel of Omiala, he declared, his voice a rich, warm baritone. We have been looking for you for a very long time. Amara didn't move. She kept her eyes on his, her face a careful blank. Femi Balogan stood off to the side, shifting his weight from foot to foot. He glanced at her, then quickly looked away, dabbing at his forehead with a handkerchief. Jide Koro was a statue by the glass table, his attention fixed on a tablet, his silver pen rolling between his fingers. "Please sit." Kaelo gestured to a plush white armchair that probably cost more than she had earned in 5 years. She remained standing. The man in the suit who had brought her retreated to the wall, becoming part of the shadows. Kaelo's smile didn't falter. He let his arms fall to his sides. "My child, do you know who we are?" "I watch the news," she replied. Her voice was steady, betraying none of the chaos inside her. "Good," the chief nodded. "Then you know we are in a difficult situation. Certain lies have been told about us, about the past." He paused, his eyes searching her face. "But you were there. You know the truth. You saw us not as monsters, but as men running for our lives." He began to pace slowly, his soft leather slippers making no sound. "How that day you saved us, a small act of kindness in a world of chaos. We never forgot it. We never forgot you." He stopped and turned to her, his expression one of deep paternal sincerity. "We want to thank you, Amara. We want to change your life." Femi coughed. "What he means is we want to give you money. A lot of it." Kaelo shot his partner a look that could freeze fire. "Femi, please." He turned back to Amara. "It is more than money. We will provide you a new apartment, a beautiful place, fully furnished, in a safe, quiet part of the city." The young woman's mind raced. An apartment, safe, quiet, a place for Jabari to breathe clean air. "We are also aware of your brother's condition," Kaelo said softly. "Jabari, we will provide him with the best medical care money can buy, the top specialist, any treatment he needs, anywhere in the world. It is ours to give." This was the blow. It landed deep in her chest, knocking the air out. Jabari, healthy. The thought was so powerful, so impossible, it made her dizzy. "What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice tight. Jide finally spoke without looking up from his device. "A testimonial. You will be the goodwill ambassador for our new Unity Foundation. You will tell your story. You will attend a press conference. Your face will represent our commitment to the community." "You want to use me?" Amara stated. It was not a question. "Use you?" Femi scoffed, stepping forward. "We're offering you a mansion and the best doctors in the world. A street girl like you should be on your knees thanking us." "Femi!" Kaelo's voice cracked like a whip. The other man flinched and fell silent, his face flushed. The chief turned back to Amara, his smile gone, replaced by a look of grave seriousness. "My friend is emotional. Please forgive him. What we are offering is an opportunity, a partnership. You help us tell the truth, and in return your life of struggle is over. Forever." Her gaze drifted past him toward the window. The city lights were beginning to glitter. Down there, people were struggling, hustling, fighting for every naira. She thought of Jabari in their tiny, damp room, his breathing a painful rasp in the night. The choice was not a choice. It was a cage. She looked back at Kaelo. "I have a question." His smile returned. "Of course, my child." "On the corner where you found me," she said, her voice even, "there was a woman who sold roasted plantain. Her name was Mama Ifa. She had a big scar over her left eye. What was the name of the woman who sold roasted plantain on the corner where you found me?" The question hung in the air. It was so specific, so out of place. Femi looked confused. Jide's pen stopped rolling. Kaelo's smile tightened at the edges. He searched his memory, a flicker of annoyance in his eyes. He saw the corner, the chaos, the fire, but the faces of the small people, the vendors, the background actors in his drama, they were a blur. He had never seen them. "I don't recall a specific name," the powerful man said, the word smooth, but his authority had a hairline crack in it. It was a very confusing day. Amara gave a slow, deliberate nod. She had her answer. To him, the people of her world were faceless. They were scenery. "All right," she said. Relief washed over the room. Femi let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. "Excellent," Kaelo beamed. "My lawyers will draw up the papers." "The documents will have a clause," Amara said, her voice firm. The chief raised an eyebrow. "Jabari's medical care," she continued. "It will be placed in a separate trust, managed by a third party, irrevocable. It cannot be touched by you or your company's finances, no matter what happens. If you go bankrupt tomorrow, his care continues for life. It is non-negotiable." Jide finally looked up from his tablet, his eyes meeting hers for the first time. He saw no fear. He saw no gratitude. He saw a mind that was calculating just like his own. Kaelo was taken aback for a second. Then he let out a great booming laugh. A businesswoman? I should have known. Sharp. Very sharp. He clapped his hands together. Of course. A brilliant idea. It shows you are thinking of the future. He gestured to Jide. You heard her. Make it happen. Ironclad. The strategist gave a curt nod, his fingers already flying across the screen of his tablet. He made a new note on her file. Subject displays unexpected strategic capabilities. Elevate monitoring protocols. Kaelo put a hand on Amara's shoulder. It felt heavy, proprietary. Welcome to the family, Amara. Your new life begins now. As one of his men escorted her to a waiting car, this time to take her to a temporary suite, her mind was a whirlwind. She had won. She had secured Jabari's future. But as she looked back at the three most powerful men in the city, she saw the truth in their eyes. They weren't welcoming her to a family. They were fitting her for a leash. They smiled at her, the triumphant smiles of zookeepers who had just captured a rare and interesting animal. They thought they had her in a cage. They had no idea she was already studying the lock. The press conference was a masterpiece of political theater. Kaelo had booked the grand ballroom at the Echo Atlantic Hotel, and it was packed. Cameras flashed like lightning in a storm. Journalists jostled for position. Amara stood in the wings, her hands cold and clammy. They had dressed her in a simple but elegant cream-colored dress made of heavy silk. Her hair was styled. Her face was made up. She felt like a doll, painted and positioned. You look perfect, Kaelo whispered, his hand briefly touching the small of her back. Just remember what we practiced. Speak from the heart. He gave her a wink as if they were sharing a private joke. Her heart was a frantic drum against her ribs. She looked at the crowd, a sea of faces waiting to be fed a story. She thought of Jabari, already settled in a private hospital wing. The sound of his clear breathing over the phone that morning. That was real. This was the price. Kaelo walked on stage to thunderous applause. He introduced the Unity Foundation, spoke of second chances, and then, with a voice thick with emotion, he introduced her. The girl who reminds us that even in the darkest of times there is light. Our angel Amara. She walked into the blinding lights. She gripped the sides of the podium, her knuckles turning white. She delivered the speech they had written for her. The words felt like ash in her mouth. She spoke of being lost and scared. She spoke of three men who had been kind to her. She spoke of their generosity 10 years later. She did not speak of the fire, the screams, or the smell of burning homes. When she finished, there was a moment of stunned silence, followed by an explosion of applause. People were on their feet. A woman in the front row was weeping. Governor Rotimi's scandal was instantly forgotten, replaced by this beautiful, heartwarming fairy tale. The days that followed were a blur. The trio's public image soared. News channels ran segments on Amara's rags to riches story. The Unity Foundation was flooded with donations. Amara was moved into the promised apartment, a sterile, high-tech box in the sky with panoramic views of the city. She saw the powerful men often. They would summon her for photo opportunities, for meetings with fawning investors. She played her part perfectly. She smiled, she was humble, she was grateful. But every moment she was there, she was watching. She noticed the quiet, hulking man who was always with Kaelo. His name was Tunde, his official title, security consultant. He had a long, thin scar that ran from his temple to his jaw. One evening, as she was leaving a foundation gala, she saw him in the parking garage talking to another guard. He laughed, a low, guttural sound, and for a split second, the image superimposed itself over a memory of a man with the same laugh, the same scar, kicking over Mama Aoife's stall of roasting plantains just before the fires started. The connection hit her like a physical blow. She stumbled, catching herself on the side of a car. It wasn't a coincidence. He wasn't just Kaelo's bodyguard. He had been there. He had been one of them. Her new life came with resources. The apartment had a high-speed fiber optic connection and a top-of-the-line laptop, courtesy of Jide. For your foundation work, he'd said. She used it. Late at night, when the city was quiet, she dug. She used the foundation's public server access, a key Jide had given her, to get past paywalls for archival news sites and city planning databases. She searched for everything she could find on the Unity riots. She found old city maps of the Omiala district from before the fires. She pulled up the blueprints for the Adebayo Pearl Tower. She spent hours cross-referencing, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Finally, she had it. She overlaid the two maps. Her old street. The little electronics shop her father had built. The corner where Mama Eve sold her plantain. They were all located directly under the massive concrete footprint of the tower's north wing. They hadn't just benefited from the riot. The event had cleared the exact piece of land they needed. A cold certainty settled in her stomach. She had to know for sure. She had to have proof. A surge of angry confidence, born of this new knowledge, made her reckless. She needed to hear it from them. She bought a burner phone from a small market stall, paying cash. It was a simple, cheap device, easy to hide. Her plan was to provoke Kaelo, to get him to admit something, anything, while the phone was recording. The next day, she was called to Kaelo's private office in the tower. It was just the two of them. This was her chance. She slipped the phone into the side pocket of her handbag, pressing the record button before she went in. She sat opposite his enormous mahogany desk. He was discussing a new charity initiative, his voice smooth and paternal. "Chief," she interrupted, her voice polite, "I was looking at some old maps of this area. It's strange. This beautiful building, it's built right on top of my old home." Kaelo stopped talking. He looked at her, his smile unwavering, but his eyes went flat and hard. "Is that so? A coincidence of progress, my dear." "And Tunda," she pressed on, her heart hammering. "Your head of security. His face is very familiar. I think he was there that day. Very active." The chief leaned forward, the smile finally vanishing. He stared at her, a long silent moment stretching between them. He said nothing. He simply picked up his phone and pressed a button. "Tunda, come to my office." The door opened less than 10 seconds later. The big man with the scar stepped inside. He glanced at Amara, then at Kaelo. "Amara has misplaced her handbag," the powerful man said calmly. "Please find it for her." Before she could react, Tunda moved with startling speed. He plucked the bag from the chair beside her. He didn't search it. He simply held it for a moment, his other hand holding a small black device. The device beeped once. The security chief opened her bag, reached inside, and pulled out the burner phone. He held it up between his thumb and forefinger. Amara's blood ran cold. The air left her lungs. Kaelo sighed, a sound of theatrical disappointment. "Recording devices. How very common. I have the entire office swept for them twice a day. A necessary precaution in my line of work." Tunda placed the phone on the desk in front of Kaelo. The chief picked it up, looked at it, and then looked at her. He wasn't angry. He was something far worse. He was amused. He dropped the phone into a glass of water on his desk. It sank to the bottom, a few bubbles rising from it before it went dark. He stood up and walked around the desk until he was standing over her. He leaned down, his face close to hers. "You have a wonderful new life, Amara," he said, his voice a deadly soft whisper. "A safe apartment. A healthy brother. Do not for 1 second think it cannot all be taken away." He straightened up and smiled, his wide, terrible smile. "Don't forget your place." He nodded to Tunda. The big man placed her handbag back on the chair beside her. "You may go now," the chief said, turning away to look out his window, dismissing her completely. Amara picked up her bag, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold it. She walked out of the office on unsteady legs. The door clicked shut behind her. She was no longer a guest. She was no longer a partner. She was a prisoner, and she had just rattled the bars of her cage. The fear was a physical thing. It lived in her throat, making it hard to swallow. For 2 days after Kaelo's threat, Amara stayed in the apartment, the silence of the rooms pressing in on her. Every passing car on the street below sounded like their SUV coming for her. Every phone call made her jump. They had cut her off. The access she'd had to the Foundation's servers was revoked. Her scheduled public appearances were postponed. She was a bird in a cage, her wings clipped. They weren't going to get rid of her yet. She was still too valuable as a symbol. But she was being watched. She knew it. Her overconfidence had been a disastrous mistake. Kaelo was a fortress. Jide was a machine. Attacking them head-on was suicide. She lay awake at night staring at the ceiling, her mind racing, replaying Kaelo's quiet, chilling words. "Don't forget your place." Her place was as a victim, a pawn. And a pawn could only move 1 square at a time. There was only one way, not the fortress, not the machine. She had to go for the crack in the wall. She had to go for Femi. She found him at the exclusive Ikoyi boat club where he spent most of his afternoons. He was holding court at a table by the water, a bottle of champagne sweating in an ice bucket beside him. His laughter was too loud, his gestures too wide. He was performing, trying to convince everyone, especially himself, how wonderful his life was. Amara didn't approach him directly. She waited. She sat at a small discreet table, ordered a bottle of water, and watched. She saw the way his eyes would glaze over when his companions were talking, the way his smile would vanish the second no one was looking directly at him. He was a man haunted. Finally, his guest left. Femi remained, staring out at the water, a half-empty glass in his hand. This was her chance. She stood up and walked over to his table. He looked up, startled, his eyes wide with alarm when he saw her. "What are you doing here?" he demanded, his voice a harsh whisper. "I was just leaving," Amara said softly. "I wanted to thank you." The man stared at her, confused. "Thank me? For what?" "For all of this," she said, gesturing vaguely at the luxurious surroundings. "For Jabari. He's breathing so much better. The doctors are hopeful." She let her voice crack just a little, a calculated tremor of emotion. "You saved his life." Femi's defensive posture softened. He looked down at his glass, swirling the champagne. "It was nothing. Kaelo's money." "It wasn't nothing to me," she replied, her voice quiet but intense. "It was everything." She paused. "It's funny. Sometimes I feel guilty." He looked up, his brow furrowed. "Guilty?" "For being the lucky one," she explained. "All those other people from Omiala, they lost everything that day, just like my family did. But they didn't get saved by billionaires. They got nothing." She let the words hang in the air. "I just wonder, do you ever think about them?" Something shifted in Femi's eyes. A wall inside him crumbled. The question was not an accusation. It was a shared secret, a burden she was inviting him to set down. He let out a ragged breath. "Every day," he whispered, the sound raw. "Every single day." He looked around, his paranoia returning. "We can't talk here." He stood up abruptly. "Walk with me." They walked along the edge of the marina, away from the clubhouse. The smell of salt and diesel filled the air. Femi was silent for a long time, his hands jammed in his pockets. "You think we are monsters," he said finally, not looking at her. "I think you're a man who can't sleep at night," she answered softly. He stopped and turned to face her. His face was a wreck of conflicting emotions. "We didn't start it," he burst out, the words tumbling over each other. The fire, the riot, it was already happening. A protest that got out of hand. "We didn't start it, I swear." Amara waited, her expression patient, her silence a vacuum begging to be filled. "But we saw the opportunity," he continued, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. He was sweating now, his silk shirt sticking to his skin. Jide saw it. He had the maps, the zoning applications we needed. The district was a gold mine, but it was full of people, small businesses, families. It would have taken years, millions in buyouts. His eyes were wild, pleading for her to understand, to absolve him. The fire was spreading, but it was on the wrong side of the street. Kaelo, he made a call. To a man. Tunde. And his boys. They just steered it. A few broken gas lines, a few blocked roads for the fire trucks. They didn't start the blaze. They just gave it a little push. He covered his face with his hands. We told ourselves it was just business. A smart business move. He dropped his hands, his face slick with sweat and tears. But I see their faces, in my dreams. All those people running. Amara stood perfectly still. This was it. The confession. More than she could have ever hoped for. Unseen by Femi, a tiny dark object was clipped to the strap of Amara's simple cloth handbag. A digital audio recorder, smaller than her thumb. It was on. "Thank you for telling me," she said, her voice filled with a carefully constructed sympathy. The man's guilt suddenly, violently curdled into something else. He looked at her calm, pitying face, and he saw not a confessor but a judge. The shame turned to pure defensive rage. "What did you expect?" he snarled, his face twisting. "You want me to cry on your shoulder? You think you're a saint?" He took a step toward her, his finger jabbing at her chest. "You took the money. You took the apartment. You are just like us." He spun around and stormed back toward the clubhouse, leaving her standing alone by the water. Amara's hand went to her bag, her fingers closing around the small recorder. She had it. She had him. Meanwhile, in Jide Okoro's sterile office, a red light blinked on a monitor. It was a keyword alert system he had implemented after Amara's first attempt. It flagged audio feeds from all known associates' phones for certain words. Words like riot, fire, Omiala, Tunde. Femi's phone had been in his pocket the entire time. Jide listened to the recording of the conversation, his face impassive. He heard Femi's pathetic whining confession. He heard Amara's soft leading questions. He heard it all. He pressed a button on his intercom. "Kaelo, we have a problem." Minutes later, the chief stood beside him, listening to the playback, his face darkening with every word. Femi burst into the office, his face flushed, still radiating panicked anger. "She knows!" Femi shouted. "Kaelo, I saw it in her eyes. She was playing me. We have to do something. We have to shut her up." Kaelo turned slowly to face his partner, his eyes glacial. He didn't say a word. He simply raised his hand and backhanded Femi across the face. The crack of the blow echoed in the silent room. Femi stumbled back, a red mark blooming on his cheek, his eyes wide with shock. "You fool," Kaelo said, his voice dangerously low. "You sentimental, blubbering fool." He turned to Jide. The two men looked at each other. Their puppet was no longer a puppet. Their PR shield was now a loaded gun pointed directly at them. The calculation was simple. The asset had become a liability. "She has a recording," the strategist stated, his voice cold and final. "She will try to use it." Kaelo walked to the window, staring down at the city below. He saw his tower, his legacy. He saw this small, insignificant girl who threatened to bring it all crashing down. His first decision had been to use her. His next decision was far simpler. He turned back to them, his face set like granite. "Then we destroy her first. We call a press conference. Tomorrow morning, we accuse her of blackmail. We release doctored bank statements showing massive payments from an account linked to Governor Rotimi. We'll say her brother's illness was a lie. We will crush her. We will make it so that no one will ever believe a word she says, even if she screams the truth from the rooftops." The ballroom was even more crowded this time. The smell of blood was in the water, and the media sharks had gathered. The emergency press conference had been called with only a few hours' notice, promising a shocking betrayal. Kaelo, Jide, and Femi sat on a raised platform, a united front of solemn victimhood. Femi had a faint bruise on his cheek, cleverly covered with makeup. He looked broken, which was perfect. Jide was impassive, a rock of stability. Kaelo was the picture of dignified pain. He stepped to the podium, the cameras flashing. He let out a heavy sigh. "There is no greater sorrow," the chief began, his voice resonating with practiced grief, "than to have your kindness thrown back in your face." He spoke of their sincere desire to help a troubled young woman. He painted a picture of Amara as a disturbed and greedy opportunist. He held up forged bank statements, expertly created by Jide's tech team, showing large deposits into an account that they had secretly opened in her name. "We discovered she was not just an opportunist," Kaelo said, his voice rising with indignation. "She was a plant, an agent of our political enemies, sent to destroy us from within." He was a master, weaving a story of manipulation and deceit. The journalists scribbled furiously. The narrative was shifting again. "She then attempted to blackmail us," the powerful man declared, his voice booming, "with fabricated stories and twisted accusations. When we refused to pay her exorbitant demands, she threatened to go to the press. We decided to beat her to it. We will not be held hostage by lies." He was about to deliver the final crushing blow, the lie about her brother's illness, when it happened. The three massive screens behind him, all showing the seal of the Adebayo group, flickered. For a second, they went black. The room murmured. Kaelo glanced back, annoyed by the technical glitch. Then the screens lit up again, but it wasn't the company logo. It was a face, Amara's face. A collective gasp went through the ballroom. Her expression was calm, her gaze steady. She wasn't in a fancy hotel. She was in a simple, sparse room, a plain wall behind her. Kaelo froze. "Turn it off," he hissed to a frantic aide in the front row. "Kill the feed!" Jide was already on his phone, his fingers flying, his face a mask of disbelief. "I can't," he muttered, his voice tight with shock. "I'm locked out. The entire hotel network. It's not responding." On the screen, Amara looked directly into the camera. "My name is Amara," she said. her voice clear and amplified by the ballroom's speaker system. "Chief Adebayo is telling you a story. Now I will show you the truth." The image on the screen changed. It was now a view of the Ikoyi Boat Club marina. Amara's voice, a recording, filled the room. "Do you ever think about them?" Then Femi's voice, raw and unmistakable. "Every day." Femi on the stage went white as a sheet. He half rose from his chair, his mouth opening in a silent scream. Kaelo put a heavy hand on his shoulder, forcing him back down. The entire confession played out. Every self-loathing word. Every damning detail about steering the fire, about Tunde and his boys, about the land grab. The room was utterly silent, every journalist holding their phone up, recording the moment. When the audio ended, Amara's face returned to the screen. "I have a brother," she said, her voice quiet but carrying immense weight. "His name is Jabari. He is sick because of the smoke he breathed during the fires these men helped create. They offered to save his life in exchange for my silence. A good deal for them." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. "They think money is the answer to everything. They think it can buy a life, buy a story, buy a person. They think their shocking decision to destroy me would be the end of it." She leaned a little closer to the camera. "So I have made my own shocking decision." From a room across town, a young man named Ayo, who grew up 2 streets from Amara in Omiala and now worked as a junior IT technician for Jide's company, hit send on a dozen encrypted files. He had seen Jide bully and humiliate his co-workers for years. He had seen the way Amara looked at the trio, and he recognized the look. It was the same look everyone from the old neighborhood had. All she had to do was ask. "The full, unedited recording you just heard," Amara announced to the stunned ballroom, along with Chief Adebayo's threats in his office, and the original untouched city maps have just been delivered to Governor Rotimi and to the BBC, and Al Jazeera, and 12 other international news outlets. Kaelo's face was a ruin. The mask was gone. All that was left was pure, unadulterated fury. He looked like a king whose castle was collapsing around him. "But I gave them one condition," she continued, her voice ringing with a power that had nothing to do with wealth. "If the Adebayo Group's assets are seized, a full 51% is not to be touched by the government. It is to be placed in a perpetual community trust managed by the people of Omiala to rebuild what was burned." This was her justice, not a check for herself, not a quiet life in a gilded cage. It was a fire of her own, a fire of restitution, of power being returned to the powerless. "They offer money to wash away their sins," she said, her eyes burning with conviction. "We, the people of Omiala, refuse it. We don't want your blood money. We want our community's voice back." The feed cut out. The screens went black. For a moment there was absolute silence. Then chaos erupted. Journalists were shouting questions, rushing the stage. Kaelo stood frozen, a statue of disbelief. Femi was openly sobbing, his head in his hands. Jide simply sat, his silver pen fallen from his fingers, staring into nothing, his perfect system utterly and completely shattered. At the back of the ballroom, the main doors swung open. A group of uniformed police officers entered, their faces grim, led by a senior detective. They began to make their way through the frantic crowd, their eyes fixed on the 3 men on the stage. Miles away, Amara closed the laptop. She turned to her brother, Jabari, who was sitting on a simple bed, watching her with wide, proud eyes. He was breathing easily. She had gotten him out of the private hospital hours ago before the broadcast. The trust she had forced them to create for his care was ironclad and separate. It was the one piece of their money she would keep. It was not a gift, it was a debt paid in full. She walked to the window of their small, clean, anonymous room. She couldn't see the Adebayo Pearl Tower from here. She could only see the sky. Below, she heard a distant sound, a swelling murmur from the city. It sounded like a tide turning.